Captain Sarah Martinez had seen enough war to know when something felt wrong. The morning air in the remote Afghan valley carried an unusual silence that made her skin crawl. She adjusted her radio headset and scanned the rocky terrain through her binoculars, watching the small village of Kalar nestled between two steep mountains. "Overwatch 1, this is Command," the voice crackled through her earpiece. "Status report." Sarah pressed the transmit button. "Command, this is Overwatch 1. Village appears quiet. No movement detected in the past 2 hours." She had been stationed on this ridge for 6 days now, part of a joint intelligence operation monitoring suspected Taliban movement through the area. Her job was simple: watch, report, and under no circumstances engage without direct orders. The rules of engagement were crystal clear, repeated to her team multiple times during briefing. But Sarah had a bad feeling about today. Down in the valley, she could see the small medical clinic that Doctors Without Borders had established 3 months ago. Dr. James Patterson and his team of 4 volunteers had been working tirelessly to provide health care to the remote mountain communities. Sarah had watched them through her scope many times, admiring their dedication as they treated everything from broken bones to complicated births. The clinic served over 200 families scattered across the mountainous region. Most had never seen a proper doctor before the medical team arrived. Children who would have died from simple infections were now running around healthy and strong. Mothers no longer feared childbirth like a death sentence. Sarah's radio buzzed again. "Overwatch 1, we're showing unusual heat signatures moving through the northern pass. Can you confirm?" She swung her binoculars toward the narrow mountain pass that wound down toward the village. At first, she saw nothing. Then, like shadows materializing from the rock itself, she spotted them. Armed figures moving in single file, staying close to the cliff face to avoid detection from aircraft. "Command, I have visual confirmation. Count approximately 15 to 20 armed individuals moving south through the pass. ETA to village approximately 40 minutes. Copy that, Overwatch 1. Continue monitoring. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage under any circumstances." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She recognized the tactical movement of the group below. These weren't local farmers or traders. The way they moved, the spacing between individuals, the careful attention to cover and concealment, these were experienced fighters. Her spotter, Corporal Jake Williams, shifted beside her in their concealed position. "Those guys don't look like they're coming for medical treatment," he muttered. "No, they don't," Sarah agreed, keeping her voice low even though they were over a mile away from the village. Through her scope, she could see Dr. Patterson emerging from the clinic, probably making his morning rounds. He was a tall, thin man in his 50s who had given up a lucrative practice in Boston to volunteer in one of the world's most dangerous regions. Beside him walked Nurse Kelly Thompson, a young woman from Minnesota who had arrived just 6 weeks ago, full of hope and determination to make a difference. Sarah had read their files as part of the security briefing. Patterson had 2 daughters in college back home. Thompson had recently gotten engaged to her high school sweetheart. None of them had any idea what was heading their way. "Command, requesting permission to warn the medical team," Sarah transmitted. "Negative, Overwatch 1. Mission parameters are observation only. Any communication with civilians could compromise operational security." Sarah bit back her response. Operational security meant nothing if good people died because of it. The armed group was moving faster now, apparently confident they hadn't been spotted. Sarah counted 22 individuals, all carrying AK-47 rifles and what appeared to be rocket-propelled grenade launchers. Several had heavy packs that could contain explosives. "Jake, get me a range to the clinic," she ordered. Williams pulled out his laser rangefinder. 830 meters. Sarah nodded. An easy shot with her M24 sniper rifle, but one shot wouldn't stop 22 men, and her orders were clear. Observe only. Down in the village, children were beginning their walk to the small school that operated out of the clinic's back room. Sarah watched through her scope as 8-year-old Amara, a girl she had observed many times, skipped happily toward the building. The child had been born with a cleft palate that Dr. Patterson had surgically repaired 2 months ago. Now she could smile without shame, laugh without covering her mouth. "Command! The hostiles are 15 minutes from the village. There are civilians in the area, including children." "Understood, Overwatch 1. Maintain position and continue observation. Help is on the way." But Sarah knew the math didn't work. The nearest military unit was at least 40 minutes away, even if they left immediately. The armed group would reach the village in 15 minutes. That left 25 minutes of exposure for the medical team and villagers. She had seen what happened when Taliban fighters raided civilian targets. The memories from her previous deployments flashed through her mind: burned buildings, executed civilians, destroyed medical supplies. These fighters didn't differentiate between combatants and aid workers. "Overwatch 1, be advised that rules of engagement remain in effect. You are not authorized to engage unless directly fired upon." Sarah's hands tightened on her rifle. She had spent 12 years in the Army, working her way up from enlisted soldier to officer. She had always followed orders, always trusted that the command structure knew better than she did about the bigger picture. But she had also sworn an oath to protect innocent life. The armed group reached a ridgeline where they paused, clearly surveying their target. Through her scope, Sarah could see their leader pointing at different buildings, apparently assigning targets to his men. The clinic was obviously a primary focus. "Jake, how long do you think those people in the clinic would last against 22 armed fighters?" Williams lowered his binoculars. "They wouldn't, ma'am. Not a chance." Dr. Patterson emerged from the clinic again, this time carrying his medical bag. He was probably heading to check on an elderly man in the village who had been recovering from pneumonia. The doctor had no idea he was walking into a killing field. Sarah's radio crackled with another transmission. "All units, be advised that Predator drone support is unavailable due to technical difficulties. Ground support ETA now 55 minutes. 55 minutes. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The armed fighters would be in and out of the village in less than 20 minutes, leaving nothing but death and destruction behind. She thought about her own daughter back home in Colorado. Emma was only 6 years old, about the same age as little Amara, who was now sitting outside the clinic, playing with a small wooden toy her father had carved for her. "Command. Requesting immediate authorization to provide warning shots to disperse hostile force." "Negative, Overwatch 1. Any engagement could escalate the situation and compromise other operations in the region. Your orders stand." Sarah felt something break inside her chest. She had been a good soldier for 12 years, following every order, trusting every decision made above her pay grade. But sitting on this ridge, watching innocent people go about their morning routine while death approached, she realized that some orders were impossible to follow. The Taliban fighters began their final approach, spreading out into assault formation. Sarah could see them checking their weapons, preparing for what would undoubtedly be a massacre. Down in the village, Dr. Patterson knelt beside an elderly woman, checking her pulse and speaking gently to her family. Nurse Thompson was teaching a group of children how to properly wash their hands, demonstrating the technique with exaggerated movements that made them giggle. None of them knew they had less than 10 minutes to live. Sarah made her choice. She turned to Williams. "Jake, I'm about to disobey a direct order. You can report this if you want, but I won't watch those people die." Williams met her eyes. "What do you need me to do, ma'am?" Sarah positioned her rifle and began calculating wind speed and distance. The Taliban fighters were now within 400 meters of the village, moving through the final approach. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they would be close enough to open fire on the clinic. "Command, this is Overwatch 1. Be advised, I am engaging hostile forces threatening civilian lives." The response was immediate and angry. "Overwatch 1, you are ordered to stand down immediately. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." Sarah turned off her radio and settled into her shooting position. Some orders were meant to be followed. Others were meant to be broken when innocent lives hung in the balance. She had made her choice, and there was no going back. The first shot echoed across the valley like thunder. Sarah's bullet found its target, dropping the Taliban leader instantly. The remaining fighters immediately scattered for cover, their carefully planned assault dissolving into chaos. Through her scope, Sarah watched as confusion rippled through their ranks. They had expected an easy target, not resistance from an unknown sniper position. Several fighters began firing wildly in different directions, unsure where the shot had come from. "Target down," Williams called out, spotting for her. "Hostiles taking cover behind the rock outcropping, 200 meters north of the village." Sarah was already tracking her next target when her radio, which she had forgotten to turn completely off, erupted with angry voices. "Overwatch 1, cease fire immediately. You are in direct violation of orders. Overwatch 1, respond immediately or face court-martial." She ignored the radio and focused on the tactical situation. The Taliban fighters were regrouping behind a cluster of boulders, but their position was exposed to her elevated shooting position. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they either retreated or found a way to approach the village from a different angle. Her second shot took down a fighter who was attempting to move to a flanking position. The man dropped his RPG launcher, which clattered down the rocky slope. That launcher could have destroyed the entire clinic with a single round. Down in the village, Dr. Patterson had heard the gunfire and was shouting for everyone to take cover. Sarah watched through her scope as he grabbed little Amara and carried her quickly into the clinic. Other villagers were running for their homes or any available shelter. But the medical team was trapped. The clinic was the largest building in the village, making it an obvious target. If the Taliban fighters managed to get close enough, they could easily storm the building. "Jake, count the remaining hostiles," Sarah ordered while chambering another round. Williams swept the area with his binoculars. "I see 16, maybe 17 still moving. 3 are trying to circle around to the east side of the village." Sarah shifted her aim to track the flanking movement. These weren't amateur fighters. Despite losing their leader and being surprised by sniper fire, they were adapting quickly and professionally. That made them even more dangerous. Her third shot caught one of the flanking fighters as he moved between cover points. The man stumbled and fell, but Sarah couldn't tell if he was dead or just wounded. Either way, it slowed down their flanking maneuver. The radio continued to crackle with increasingly frantic orders from command. She could hear her commanding officer, Colonel James Harrison, demanding that she cease fire and respond. Other voices were coordinating to send a helicopter to extract her team immediately. But Sarah knew that once she stopped shooting, the Taliban fighters would press their attack. The villagers and medical team would be defenseless. "Ma'am, they're setting up what looks like a mortar position behind that big boulder," Williams reported urgently. Sarah found the position through her scope. 3 fighters were assembling what appeared to be a portable mortar system. If they got that weapon operational, they could shell the entire village from a safe distance. She took careful aim at the fighter handling the mortar tube. The shot was more difficult because of the angle and distance, but she had been training for shots like this for over a decade. The bullet struck the man's center mass, and he collapsed onto the mortar, damaging the weapon. His 2 companions immediately grabbed the equipment and tried to retreat to a more secure position, but Sarah was already tracking them. Her next shot scattered their group, sending mortar rounds rolling down the rocky slope. 4 down, at least 13 still active, Williams updated her. Through her scope, Sarah could see muzzle flashes as the remaining Taliban fighters began returning fire in her general direction. Most of their shots were going wide, but a few bullets struck the rocks near their concealed position, sending chips of stone flying. They're starting to zero in on our position, Williams warned. Sarah knew they couldn't stay here much longer, but every minute she kept the fighters pinned down was another minute for the villagers to find better cover, and another minute closer to the arrival of military support. Her radio suddenly went quiet, and then a new voice came through. It was General Patricia Morrison, the regional commander. Sarah had met her once during a briefing, and she knew the general's reputation for being both tough and fair. "Captain Martinez, this is General Morrison. I need you to listen to me very carefully." Against her better judgment, Sarah keyed her radio while keeping her rifle trained on the hostile position. "Go ahead, General." "I understand the situation you're facing, Captain. I also understand why you made the choice you did. But I need you to know that your actions are being recorded and will have serious consequences." Sarah watched as 3 Taliban fighters attempted to move closer to the village using a dry creek bed for cover. She adjusted her aim and waited for one of them to expose himself. "General, with respect, those people down there are going to die if I stop shooting. I can't live with that." "I know, Captain, and I want you to know that help is coming. But you need to understand that you've started something here that could have implications far beyond this valley." Sarah's next shot caught a fighter who had raised his head too high above the creek bank. The man fell back into the rocky stream bed and didn't move. "General, what implications are more important than the lives of innocent civilians and medical personnel?" There was a long pause before General Morrison responded. "Captain, what you don't know is that this valley is part of a larger intelligence operation. We've been tracking this particular Taliban cell for 3 months, trying to identify their supply routes and command structure. Your engagement has likely compromised months of intelligence gathering." Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach, but she didn't lower her rifle. "So we were supposed to let them massacre civilians to protect an intelligence operation?" "The plan was to intercept them before they reached the village. The delay in support was due to a helicopter mechanical failure, not poor planning." Through her scope, Sarah could see the remaining Taliban fighters regrouping. They had taken significant casualties and were now in a defensive position, but they showed no signs of retreating. If anything, they seemed more determined than ever. "General, respectfully, the plan failed. Those people needed help now, not in an hour." William suddenly grabbed her arm. "Ma'am, I've got movement on the south side of the village. Looks like more hostiles approaching." Sarah swung her rifle toward the new threat and felt her blood run cold. Another group of fighters, at least a dozen strong, was approaching the village from the opposite direction. The original Taliban cell had apparently been the advance team for a much larger force. "General, we have a bigger problem. I count at least 12 additional hostiles approaching from the south. This was a coordinated attack." The radio was silent for several seconds. When General Morrison spoke again, her voice was grim. "Captain, I need to know exactly what you're seeing." Sarah quickly described the tactical situation while tracking the new group of fighters. They were better equipped than the first team, with what appeared to be heavier weapons and more sophisticated communication equipment. "Jake, get me a count on the original group," she ordered. "I see 8 still moving, but they're staying in hard cover now. The new group is about 6 minutes from the village if they maintain current speed." Sarah's mind raced through the tactical possibilities. She was one sniper against at least 20 fighters, with limited ammunition and no support. The villagers and medical team were caught in the middle of what was clearly a well-planned operation. "General, I need immediate air support or extraction for those civilians. I can't hold off both groups indefinitely." "Air support is en route, ETA 12 minutes. Ground support is still 40 minutes out." 12 minutes was a lifetime in combat. The second group of fighters would reach the village in 6 minutes, and Sarah would be caught between 2 enemy forces with no backup. But looking through her scope at little Amara's face pressed against the clinic window, Sarah knew she had made the right choice. Even if it cost her everything, she couldn't have lived with herself if she had followed orders and watched innocent people die. The radio crackled again with General Morrison's voice. Captain Martinez, for what it's worth, I would have made the same choice. But I need you to understand that this engagement has been elevated to the highest levels. There will be consequences. Sarah chambered another round and adjusted her scope for the approaching second group. General, I'll face whatever consequences come. But first, I need to keep these people alive. The second group of Taliban fighters had reached the edge of the village and were beginning to spread out for their assault. Sarah could see they were coordinating with the surviving members of the first group, preparing for a synchronized attack on the clinic. She had perhaps 2 minutes before both groups would storm the building where Dr. Patterson, Nurse Thompson, and at least a dozen villagers were taking shelter. Against 20 armed fighters, they wouldn't stand a chance. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared for the fight of her life. Court-martial or not, she was going to save those people or die trying. The coordinated assault began with a rocket-propelled grenade that slammed into the ground 50 meters from the clinic, sending a shower of dirt and rocks against the building's walls. Sarah watched through her scope as Dr. Patterson pulled the children away from the windows, his face pale but determined. "They're making their move," Williams called out, tracking multiple targets through his binoculars. "First group advancing from the north, second group from the south. They're trying to catch us in a crossfire." Sarah had to make an impossible choice. She couldn't engage both groups simultaneously from her position. Whichever group she focused on, the other would have a clear path to the clinic. "Jake, I need you to take the spotter rifle and focus on the southern group. I'll take the northern assault team." Williams grabbed the backup M24 they had brought for emergencies. He wasn't as experienced a marksman as Sarah, but he was a competent shooter and their only hope of covering both approaches. Sarah's first shot dropped the lead fighter from the northern group just as he broke cover to rush toward the clinic. The man had been carrying what appeared to be explosives, and his death caused the others to hesitate momentarily. But the southern group wasn't waiting. They began their assault while Sarah was focused on the north, and Williams engaged them with rapid, precise shots. His first round caught a fighter in the shoulder, spinning him around and causing him to drop his weapon. "Nice shot, Jake," Sarah called out while tracking her next target. The radio suddenly came alive with a new voice. "Overwatch 1. This is Apache 77. We are 2 minutes out and have visual on your position." Sarah felt a surge of hope. Apache helicopters carried enough firepower to end this fight quickly, but 2 minutes was still too long. The Taliban fighters were already within 100 meters of the clinic. A burst of automatic gunfire erupted from inside the village as one of the southern fighters got close enough to spray bullets at the clinic windows. Sarah could see muzzle flashes coming from behind a low stone wall where the fighter had taken cover. She shifted her aim and fired, but the angle was difficult, and her shot struck the wall instead of the target. The fighter immediately moved to a different position, making himself harder to track. "Ma'am, they're using smoke grenades," Williams reported urgently. Gray smoke began billowing from multiple locations around the village as the Taliban fighters tried to obscure their final assault. Within seconds, visibility was severely reduced, and Sarah found herself shooting at muzzle flashes and brief glimpses of movement rather than clear targets. Through the smoke, she could hear shouting in Pashto as the fighters coordinated their attack. They were professional enough to use the cover effectively, but aggressive enough to press forward despite their losses. A new sound cut through the chaos, the distinctive whine of Apache helicopter rotors approaching at high speed. "Overwatch 1. Apache 77 has visual on multiple hostiles in the village. We are cleared hot and engaging." Sarah had never been happier to hear those words in her life. She watched as the first Apache helicopter swept over the village, its 30mm cannon opening fire with a sound like a giant zipper being pulled. The cannon rounds tore through the Taliban positions, sending fighters scrambling for deeper cover, but the smoke grenades worked both ways, and the helicopter pilots were having difficulty distinguishing between civilians and combatants in the confusion. "Apache 77, Be advised there are civilians in the clinic building center of village. Repeat, friendlies in the clinic. Copy that. Overwatch 1. We see the building, adjusting fire to avoid civilian casualties. The second Apache joined the attack from a different angle, using its rockets to strike Taliban positions that were far enough from the clinic to avoid collateral damage. The combined firepower was devastating, but several fighters were still close enough to the clinic to pose a threat. Sarah saw movement through the smoke near the clinic's front entrance. A Taliban fighter was preparing to throw something at the building, probably a grenade. She lined up the shot through swirling gray smoke, waiting for a clear view. For a split second, the smoke parted enough to reveal the fighter's silhouette. Sarah's bullet caught him center mass just as he pulled the pin on his grenade. The explosion occurred 20 meters from the clinic, far enough away to avoid serious damage, but close enough to shatter several windows. Through her scope, Sarah could see Dr. Patterson shielding the children with his own body as glass fragments rained down. Last hostile eliminated on the north side, Williams reported. I count 3 still moving on the south, but they're falling back. The Apache helicopters continued their attack, pursuing the retreating fighters with methodical precision. Within minutes, the valley had fallen silent except for the sound of rotor blades and the ringing in Sarah's ears from the prolonged gunfight. Overwatch 1. This is Apache 7-7. We show no more hostile movement in the village. What's your status? Sarah lowered her rifle and keyed her radio. Apache 7-7, this is Overwatch 1. Hostile threat neutralized. Civilians in the clinic appear to be secure. Through her scope, she watched as Dr. Patterson cautiously emerged from the clinic, looking around at the destruction. Nurse Thompson followed him, helping to escort the children to safety. Little Amara was crying but appeared unharmed. The radio crackled with General Morrison's voice. Captain Martinez, this is General Morrison. Status report. Sarah took a deep breath before responding. General, hostile forces have been neutralized. Civilian casualties appear minimal. The medical team and villagers are secure. Copy that, Captain. Ground forces are now 5 minutes out to secure the area. I need you and Corporal Williams to remain in position until they arrive. Understood, General. Williams lowered his rifle and turned to look at Sarah. Ma'am, what do you think happens now? Sarah watched as Dr. Patterson began checking the villagers for injuries, his medical training taking over despite the trauma he had just experienced. She saw Nurse Thompson comforting the children, her voice barely audible but her gestures gentle and reassuring. I don't know, Jake, but I know those people are alive because we chose to act instead of following orders. The radio came alive again, this time with Colonel Harrison's voice. Captain Martinez, you are hereby ordered to report to headquarters immediately upon return to base. You are relieved of duty pending a full investigation into your actions. Sarah had expected this moment, but hearing the words still hit her like a physical blow. She had thrown away 12 years of military service and possibly her entire future in the span of 30 minutes. Acknowledged, Colonel, she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. But as she watched the medical team continue their work in the village below, she knew she would make the same choice again. Orders were important, chain of command was important, but some things were more important than both. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the valley as ground forces finally arrived to secure the area. Sarah began breaking down her sniper position, preparing for whatever consequences awaited her back at base. Williams packed up their equipment in silence for several minutes before speaking. Ma'am, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Thanks, Jake. That means a lot. What will you tell them at headquarters? Sarah shouldered her rifle and took one last look through her binoculars at the village below. Dr. Patterson was now treating a villager who had been injured by flying debris, his steady hands working to bandage a minor cut. Nurse Thompson was distributing water to the children, her smile helping to calm their fears. I'll tell them the truth, that sometimes following orders means letting innocent people die, and I couldn't live with that choice. The ground forces reached their position 20 minutes later. The team leader, a young lieutenant Sarah didn't recognize, was clearly uncomfortable with his orders. "Ma'am, I'm ordered to escort you back to base immediately. Your weapons will be secured pending the investigation." Sarah handed over her rifle without argument. "Lieutenant, make sure someone checks on that medical team. They've been through hell today." "Yes, ma'am. The medics are already en route to the village." As they walked toward the waiting vehicles, Sarah's radio crackled one final time. It was Dr. Patterson's voice, somehow patched through to her frequency. "To whoever was watching over us today, thank you. You saved our lives and the lives of these villagers. We'll never forget that." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't respond to the transmission. There would be time for thanks later if she wasn't sitting in a military prison. The ride back to base was conducted in silence. Sarah stared out the window at the rugged Afghan landscape, thinking about the choice she had made and the consequences she would face. She thought about her daughter Emma back home, who would grow up knowing that her mother had chosen to save lives rather than follow orders. She thought about Dr. Patterson and Nurse Thompson, who would continue their medical work because someone had decided their lives were worth defending. Most of all, she thought about little Amara, who would have another chance to smile without shame because someone had chosen conscience over command. 3 weeks later, Captain Sarah Martinez stood before a military tribunal to answer charges of disobeying direct orders and engaging hostile forces without authorization. The evidence against her was clear and undeniable. But something unexpected happened during her court-martial. Dr. Patterson flew from Afghanistan to testify on her behalf. Nurse Thompson sent a written statement describing Sarah's actions as heroic. The villagers had written letters, translated into English, thanking the unknown sniper who had saved their lives. Most surprisingly, General Morrison took the stand to testify that while Sarah's actions violated orders, they were consistent with the military's fundamental duty to protect innocent life. In the end, Sarah was found guilty of disobeying orders, but received a reprimand rather than prison time. She chose to resign her commission rather than face a reduced rank and limited career prospects. Today, Sarah works as a private security consultant, using her military training to protect civilian workers in conflict zones around the world. She never regrets the choice she made that morning in the Afghan valley. Because sometimes the right choice is the hardest choice. And sometimes saving lives is more important than following orders.